So let's look into the 4 phases of the epigenetic autoimmune protocol. Now, if you're in a serious flare-up, I again would recommend seeing a clinician. Between you and I, we have never met, we've never had a conversation, we have no way of establishing what your needs are, so in no way is this conversation any kind of personal or professional medical advice. I'm just speaking to you about a protocol that I work with respect to patients that I work with directly. So if you're in a serious flare-up, the most important thing is to start with phase 1, which is the anti-inflammatory protocol. And the most important thing to think of in that sense is how do you downregulate the chaos of what your immune system has been doing to fight the good fight against the world, and unfortunately right now against certain aspects of your own body. I usually recommend at least a few weeks on the anti-inflammatory protocol. It's a very simple diet, it's high in essential fatty acids, it's nutrient dense, it's full of polyphenols. We often also include medically supervised fasting cycles for anyone in a big flare-up because they're often quite necessary. After things settle down, which usually isn't more than 5 or 6 weeks, we can move on to phase 2. So you're still maintaining an anti-inflammatory diet, but you also want to increase the nutrient density in your diet, specifically around tissue repair. This phase can last sometimes up to a couple of months or more, and we focus on eating as much as we can the food substrates and sources, and perhaps the supplementation necessary to ensure that every aspect of tissue repair and healthy circulation is maintained and supported and stimulated in as many ways as make sense for you. After at least a couple of months of that, we move on to phase 3. And this is often referred to as a reintroduction diet. Now, sometimes we're reintroducing specific foods, and sometimes we're reintroducing activities, exercises, and other challenges to test whether or not all aspects of your physiology are healing. So on a reintroduction diet, you're essentially just bringing in potentially challenging foods. This is most often because we really want to eat them, or we just want to find out how reactive and easily triggered our immune system might be. This process can take a certain amount of time depending on how likely you are to have an overt immune response to regular foods or have a specific immune response to foods that you've had a sensitivity to. Now keep in mind there's a difference between a food allergy, a food sensitivity, a food intolerance, a stress-driven food reaction, and, believe it or not, a complete lack of responses and reactions to highly triggering foods. So after phase 3, you've figured out what you should be eating, what you can be eating, and what you probably should never be eating again. You can move on to phase 4. We often refer to the phase 4 protocol as the healthy homesteader protocol because it invites us to eat what a healthy homesteader would have been eating or what your grandparents might have been eating 3 or 4 generations ago. So we can reintroduce healthy, organic, preferably goat dairy, and then see if cow dairy is still a good idea, as well as ensuring that you have access to preferably homemade fermented foods. So with these 4 phases, focusing on inflammation, then focusing on tissue repair, focusing on reintroducing challenging foods, and then trying to find an optimal overall diet, hopefully make perfect sense on their own. And those 4 phases could be something you could manage very much on your own if you choose to. So clearly you could guide yourself through phase 1, 2, 3, 4. It's also worth considering that if you're not in a serious flare-up, you're not in a life-threatening situation, your symptoms are stable, you don't feel like turning your life upside down right now because life is just going that way. You can also go through this process backwards. You can start in phase 4 and stop eating processed foods and just focusing on that healthy homesteader approach to eating. And for some people, things just gradually get better from there. If that isn't working to improve your health, then the next thing is to move up to phase 3. And that may be a really good way for you to just go through isolating and reintroducing the most potentially triggering foods. If that doesn't help you feel better within a few weeks or months, then of course the next thing to do is to move your way into phase 2, where you're just eating nutrient-dense, healthy, anti-inflammatory foods that repair tissue. If you're doing that for a while and still your immune system is in an autoimmune response in some way, then just based on how the immune system works in the sense of molecules and information and inflammation, you may have to spend a certain amount of time, a few weeks at least, on that phase 1 autoimmune protocol, the anti-inflammatory protocol, to make sure your immune system has been reset from the inside out. Some of us, as much as we would rather not, have to actually teach our immune system how to behave in a healthier way. If you want to do this in as self-guided a way as possible, I still highly recommend working with a clinician. But make sure you're working with a clinician who wants to be on your detective team, not theirs. Believe it or not, outside of emergencies, doctors are actually meant to be educators who work for you. So let's take a moment and look at those 6 pillars. Now, when we look at that list, I think they make pretty much common sense. As you go through each of those 4 phases, in whichever direction you choose to go, it's up to you to decide how much you're going to focus on each of these pillars. Now, I recommend as much as you can for all of them, but we all have our own approach to life and what's important and what we may or may not really feel is okay for us to focus on. So when you look at this list, what are you the most immediately attracted to, and what are the ones or one that you might be the least interested in? And that immediately will help you make the biggest difference, which is do what it is you feel drawn to and what you would choose to avoid. So let's say you've just had a flare-up, you're going into phase 1, you want to focus on that anti-inflammatory protocol. If you were to make a list of each of those 6 pillars and fill out underneath of them the things you are pretty sure would help you reduce inflammation, stabilize your immune system, help your body get the rest it needs, and help things reset their normal baseline of function, what list would you put under each of those pillars? It's actually a worthwhile exercise. Please give it a try. And the reason why this is important is for most of us, we need to feel a sense of autonomy. We want to have a sense that we are actually steering and navigating our healing process in the ways that we are most likely to commit to. But also, I would encourage all of us to please stay open to the ones that we might not be the most open to, because there might be something in there that we actually really need. So let's take a moment and look at the 5 stages of the autoimmune spectrum. A question worth asking anyone is, how long have you been having symptoms of autoimmune dysfunction? For many people, there is evidence that things start when they're born because of how they're born. Some people between 2 and 4 years old develop certain conditions that give us, kind of like the dashboard lights on your car, a sense of how likely you are throughout the rest of your life to develop autoimmune dysfunction. So if you're just having erratic immune behavior, like strange allergies, if you're starting to feel like you're developing a chronic illness, if you're actually given your first fixed name autoimmune condition, absolutely, you're in the club of autoimmune disease, both diagnostically, genetically, and epigenetically. If you have more than one, you have complex autoimmune disease. And if you're in that situation, you might want to consider 2 to 3 years of your life being completely committed to seeing if you can turn that around, because if you don't turn that around, it's going to keep going in the direction that it seems like it wants to go. And if you're in stage 5, which means you have a life-threatening or life-ending diagnosis, there's really nothing else to say except for the rest of your life, it would probably be the best possible choice to do everything you can to improve your vitality, your longevity, your immune function, your nutrient density, your hormonal balance, your depth of sleep, and every other possible thing to support your well-being. There is a thing in medicine called spontaneous remissions. In fact, there's books written by doctors about spontaneous remissions. I've seen unbelievable numbers of people who statistically should have had no hope to improve their health, who are now living long, happy, and healthy, vibrant lives. So, statistics tell us what might happen. How we live our lives and how profoundly meaningfully we connect to our choices might have a lot more to do with your outcomes than just statistics on averages. So if you do work with a clinician, I would encourage both of you to make some distinctions about where you are on that autoimmune spectrum. Again, I would encourage everyone to take the autoimmunity predisposition questionnaire. There's a few out there. That's meant to help everyone involved to be as determined and consistent and committed as they can be for as long as they need to be. One last thing I want to share with you is that my focus as a clinician has become very, very focused on bio-individuality. And that means that your unique autoimmune journey is a puzzle that can only be solved by a team of detectives that work for you and with you. And hopefully you are, of course, willing to join and lead that team yourself. Your ancestry will inform you and your team of detectives what your genes have survived through and thrived on for the last 5,000 years or so. And that sometimes is a really great place to start because it makes it more specific to you and your ancestors, while also just honoring what most of human history has been like. In my clinical practice, I focus a lot on epigenetics, which is how your gene expression interacts with your world. Sometimes getting your genes tested can be a game changer, and sometimes it can kind of get us stuck in the mire of trying to fix every little tiny small thing instead of taking a step back and focusing on fixing what you might consider the orchestra of your genes and epigenetics with respect to most of your life. It's been my experience that it's much more important to make sure you are investing some time on stimulating the most effective epigenetic habits, or what are called epigenetic resets. Now, this means imitating certain evolutionary patterns, from perhaps how much water you drink and when you drink it, to how much exercise you do and the kind, and again, how much and when, how much you sleep, what kind of breath work you may or may not practice, and also even how you interact with sunrise and sunset. Epigenetic resets are good for everyone who has evolved as a human being over the last 10, 20,000 years. So you could say they help us all because they trigger our genes back to something that has worked throughout evolutionary time. So again, welcome to All Things Autoimmunity. Welcome to this YouTube channel. In the near future, I'll be updating with some mini podcasts, information about each of the 4 phases, each of the 6 pillars, each of the 5 stages of the autoimmune spectrum, and talk a bit about those predisposition kind of questionnaires. My hope in sharing what it is that I've developed over the last 30 years is to support you in designing and developing your own autoimmune protocol that suits your life, your diagnosis, your age, and where you are on the autoimmune spectrum. If you need to have a conversation with me, please feel free to connect with me. I usually see patients twice a week virtually. If you have a specific question or a topic you would like to see addressed, I'm in the middle of making a great amount of content and videos, so I'd be happy to make one to help you with your questions. I hope this video has inspired you on how many things you can do on your own to improve your health starting today. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.